Welcome to the podcast again for this week as we edge closer to the finals. Blocker, Kenty, how are you, boys?
We're going good, Matty. Hey,
Fine.
I hope we're on come semi-final time, are we? Are we going to keep going?
Of course we are.
Oh,
Of course we are. Hey, today we're going to talk about combinations, boys, and how rugby league
What do you
combinations...
want, left, right, uppercut, or what do you want?
What do you say, Block?
Oh,
Hit me with so many lefts, I'm begging for a
I'm
right.
begging for a right.
Now, we're going to talk about how rugby league combinations have changed over the years as tactics have changed and formations on the field have changed. And before we kick off, we're effectively going to do the 80s and 90s, but we're going to go back a little bit further. At where it first started. And Kenty, you want to go back, I'm talking, to the great St George sides and people like Gasnier.
Yeah, well, Gasnier was a... look, you talk about back in the day, Matty, forwards, back in those days, the only real, I suppose, stability in your combinations were your centres, who always played next to each other.
Yep.
And so they'd always defend the open side, and then as play drifted across field, they'd slowly swing over to the other, when the blind side became the open side, they'd swing over and things like that. Whereas in the middle, there was no combinations with the forwards between the second rows and props and
They floated around.
they just floated. They basically went where they were needed. So the one I look at was Harry Wells, who played at West, but they were a big combination for Australia in the day, and Reg Gasnier, and that sort of set a bit of a template for the perfect centre combination of the big, powerful Harry Wells, who hit the line, pushed through the line, and then he had a fast Gasnier running off him.
Great nickname. The dealer.
The dealer.
The dealer.
I don't know. I don't want to ask Block.
Well, he dealed out the ball to Gas.
Oh, right.
Hey,
Right.
Okay.
It is a 60.
Yeah, I thought you were talking like an Escobar.
I didn't know whether you were talking about illegal casino.
No.
No, but so it began back then, and it sort of, I think, really began to reach a high point when you go into, there was times when Langlands and Fulton were playing in the centres together, and then you look more lately where it began, and I think the perfect sort of formation of that was Mick Cronin and Steve Rogers.
It's very interesting how, when you're talking about Wells and Gasnier, how centres sort of played the same way up until the late 80s, early 90s, when it was, when they split. It was a hangover from rugby union in the fact that, the formation was scrum half, 5/8, ball playing centre, express centre.
Runner.
Yeah.
And that's the further the back line went out in rugby league, the more athletic they got.
Yeah.
The inside centre, as opposed to the outside centre, had a bit of skill about him.
Yeah.
He was almost an extension of the 5'8", a second 5'8". And an example was, Sterling, onto Kenny, onto Cronin, as you said, who was strong and could ball play, onto Weller, who was a pure athlete.
Yeah.
And they used to call Cronin the Artie Beetson of the back line. That was his nickname back in the day.
That's right.
And he was, when he first came in, he had big, strong hips and just had that little soft.
Had that shuffle too.
Yeah.
Didn't he?
Yeah.
Had that little shuffle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and then he had that Steve Rogers outside him, who Steve Rogers is never fully appreciated in this game how great he was. He could do everything on the football field that a player needed to do, but he had superb pace, a beautiful athletic running style, great balance.
Glider.
He was a glider the way he ran. So they sort of set that template. And again, because the game was in that early sort of stages where until really the 60s and then the 70s began with Jack, the game was basically, it was a game of 13 individuals just trying to work together. There was no formations. There was very little. There's no
Combinations,
as such back then. You basically defended. You made a tackle when a bloke ran into you. You got up and you got back in the line wherever you were, and everyone just sort of adjusted around that. And that's the way I played. And Jack came in and started to put a little bit of science in the game, and then obviously Warren Ryan in the late 70s came into the game, and then it really rocketed on from that. And that's
Another sort of formation.
Yeah.
They copied a bit off the Poms, didn't they? When you had a look at all those English ball players that could stand in tackles, Mateague and all those
Yeah,
sort of
right.
blokes, Lockwood.
It's interesting, like you said that, because my dad was a really good lock forward coming through, and just about one of the youngest players to play for Curry up there in the Newcastle comp. And I said to Dad, "You've been a lock forward. How did you play back in those days?" And he just said, "Mate, I floated all around the field, and I would find the bloke that I worked best with and just carry him around the field with me,
Yeah.
basically."
No, 100%. Yeah.
And remember, like it was, and I came through as a halfbacker of 5'8", and what the golden rule was that I always swung to the long side with my two centres who would swing with me,
Yeah.
and the lock would operate the short side.
Yeah.
So that was
Count the numbers on the short
That was
side.
suddenly, yeah.
there was so much more freedom, and then the bloke who oftentimes steered the side around the park was the clever playmaking second rower.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, it's
Well, you got
very
that.
strange.
You go back to the early '80s there, where Gould, for example, was doing that at Newtown, and just playing short sides. Gavin Miller was the great short side player, and beautiful short pass and
Soft hands.
and sort of he almost set the template for how halfbacks play now, where they got to get into the line. You got to stick your head into it and take a whack to get the ball away. Back in that day, they didn't do that yet.
He was good at that, but he was good at that, Gavin.
because he was so tough.
Yeah, but the other thing too is if you got him, he'd square the ledger
And he
too.
knew-
So most ball players
Yeah.
didn't sort of get back at you, but mate, Gavin.
And he knew elbows weren't there to bend your arm.
No.
They were there to inflict damage.
yeah.
And protect yourself.
Yeah.
I remember playing Gavin Miller. Gavin was getting towards the end. We were in 1991, and we had a really young reserve grade side. Blokes like there was Rodney Howe, there was Adam Muir. And we're playing at Caltex Field. Arthur must have been the coach of the first grade side then. Gavin was coming back from injuries. He was struggling a little bit. So we're playing Gavin. We're all young blokes. Gavin's playing reserve grade. Gavin doesn't want to be there. And he's sort of going through the motions. We get into the second half and he sort of catches the ball and he fumbles it. Adam Muir goes, "You're fucking hopeless."
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Flicks the switch.
Yeah.
Suddenly made his handling, as he does, back-to-back plays. I remember one point he got there and he's got the ball like this and we've gone up to defend him and he's got a bloke coming onto the football. He acts like he's going to pass around the back of the player. The last minute switches at the other hand.
Yeah,
Something like that.
Very good.
Talking about Gavin and his combination, I tell you that were a really good combination. One we never ever talk about is Gavin Miller and Barry Russell.
Barry Russell.
Yeah.
Did Barry Russell win? Was it the Rothmans medal and that year Gavin won the Daly M? Was it? Or
Yep. In
Barry won the Rothmans. Yeah.
Yep. And
it was
Gavin won the Rothmans
with
Barry,
Mark Sargent.
Yes, the first ever tied one, and Barry won the '89 Dally M medal.
Yeah.
But watching those blokes play, it was it was Gavin, and to be honest, mate, it wasn't like back rower. Back rower, halfback.
Oh,
It was they played like a half 5'8".
Yeah.
Like Gavin was their halfback.
Yeah.
And you watch him, and he'd handle on back-to-back plays,
Yeah.
and he would play. And to look at Barry Russell, then Barry Russell wasn't what you call a natural playmaker at all. If I had to compare anyone to Barry Russell now, I'd just say Matt Duffy.
Yeah.
He was a pure runner of the football, diminutive bloke who could really hit a hole.
Yeah.
And Gavin just complimented him.
Well, talk about Gavin. He played in that his very first test, and this is the confidence of the bloke. His very first test was against the Kiwis in the World Cup final in 1988. Both him and I we were playing in England. We flew back for the game, right? So Gavin's there in his very first test. Now this shows a bloke who belongs. In there before the game, and they're waffling on about what we're going to do and all that sort of stuff. Blokes are getting changed and all that. And the coach goes, "Anyone got anything to say?" Gavin stands up and he goes, "I'm going to bring out the utensils today." And we're all going, "What?" I'm going to bring out. I'm going to ball play. We're all, "Oh, yeah, man, that's fine. Your first test. This will be good." Mate, the bloke went out and did it.
Yeah.
Mate, he just put on 2 tries, and you know how he ran the ball, as you said, back-to-back runs and all that sort of stuff. So that to me is a bloke who belongs, who doesn't sit back and go, "Oh, I'm playing in my first one. I'll just ease my way in."
Yeah.
Want to fit in.
He goes, "Hey boys, I'm gonna bung on a show today."
Rob Massey says he's the best player he ever saw.
Well,
Ooh, that's a big rap.
I just written now, so I think of all the playmakers in my time that I've watched rugby league, I put him in the top 3 playmakers I've ever seen.
Yeah,
He's
he's
just a
good.
genius.
He was one of the blokes, wasn't he, Matty, when you used to sit with Alan Bell and he used to show you the videos and just watch how he just sets up the blind side here.
Absolutely. Alan Bell used to give myself and Andrew, which he must took more attention to the tapes than I did. Mate, I've got him in the back of my car now.
Yeah.
Because Mum said, mate, those tapes Alan gave you, I'll give them to you and see if someone from Fox Sports can put them onto the modern technology. And that. So they're sitting in
Still
my boot
there.
at the moment. I should have brought them in. But we had about 5 or 6 3-hour videos, and it was Gavin Miller short sides, Lang Mac short sides, Broman short sides.
Yeah, Broman was good too. Broman, Broman could grub her in that too, at the line.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Clever.
He was a kick.
No, he's a clever
short kick.
player.
Then we'd have Alan Langer, relentless, going to the line. Ricky Stewart, width. And just, it was over and over. Alexander, athleticism.
Yeah, speed off the mark.
And different blokes like Kevy Walters. You say about Kevy Walters, how you tell a lie with the football. Catch the ball, show it on the inside, pass it on the outside. Little things that, just those little subtleties that worked. I remember Gavin talking about how tough Gavin was, because he was like, I never saw him go, but they tell me he was incredible with the knuckle.
Oh, they reckon he could go. Yeah, I never seen him, but the stories are.
He and Arthur Beetson came up and did.
My grandfather told me once, God rest his soul, old Rube Whitten, he was a tough old bugger. And he said to me, when you look at blokes with smashed in faces, he said either they've had 1,000 fights or they can't fight.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a good line, isn't it?
Well,
They're burning $1 million. Yeah.
Well, Gavin, look at his fight, mate. He really paid for his craft. Blokes are going out every week. He's the halfback. He's everything to Cronulla, and they just bash.
But he's a genuine ball player, so he's got the ball in his hand doing that.
Yeah.
And he's getting hit. Like, he knows he's going to get hit.
Talk about English influence. They tell me, because I think he started at Easts or Wests.
West he started at.
Started West.
As a 7-year-old or something. He was young, just a boy.
And he was a centre.
Yeah.
They said not really a playmaker.
Yeah.
Went over and played for Hull Kingston Rovers for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Came back as a
Legend.
genius. And that's, you're saying, that English influence.
Yeah.
Well, they had to learn over there because they played on the bog fields.
Yes.
Where
Offload the ball.
Well, that's what the game was. It wasn't
In winter.
the athleticism that's in the Australian game couldn't be there because you didn't have the field to run on. So
That's right.
You had to work your way up.
Learn to
You
get
had
the ball away.
start a little short passes. How you got up.
Well, Chris Anderson, remember Chris Anderson? He went and was captain coach at Halifax over there.
Graham Moody played in the
Graham Moody played in the side. That Wembley game they played against Wigan, where Wigan actually give it to him in the final. But when Chris Anderson came back, I was having a chat to him about how he sort of founded that flat style, because Ope started it. Chris Anderson doesn't get credit. He started that flat and fast style. I said, what did you do? He said, mate, because in England you couldn't,
The bog.
because of the bog, you couldn't play a deep momentum-based game.
Yeah.
It was all about short
Flat and
passing.
fast.
Yeah.
Talk about Gavin for a second. We up at Cessnock, Arthur and Gavin, Arthur Beetson, Gavin Miller came up and they did a bit of a chat at the Cessnock League Club. You probably did one over the years.
Over the years, yeah.
And everyone said, anyway, afterwards, they said, one of the publicans said, listen, after this, everyone's invited to the pub. Arthur, Gavin, you blokes drink for free. So, yep, they all go back there. One of the local blokes says to Gavin, one of the blokes says to Gavin, mate, I want to have a game of pool. Gavin says, fine. And he goes, mate, how about we play for $50? Gavin says, sweet. So they're playing, everyone's standing there watching. Anyway, Gavin goes, boom, 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 bang, puts the black ball away and he wins. And the bloke picks his $50 up and puts it in his pocket. And Gav says, mate, I want that $50.
Yeah.
Bloke goes, no, mate, I was joking, I'm not going to give it to you. Arthur walks up to the bloke and
Mate,
said,
I'd give it to you.
mate, I think you better hand over the $50.
But Arthur would have said, and I'm not a bad wingman.
Boys, in the 80s, who do you the best half 5'8" combination? Which one was the best? Was it Sterling Kenny?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, mate, what about Mortimer and Lamb? Terry Lamb had this unbelievable ability of just being at the right place at the right time. Mortimer in those days, I mean, there was a struck match between them. They were different players, Mortimer and Sterling. But if you put those two together and then you say who's the best combination, you'd have to say Sterling and Kenny, mainly because, mate, Sterling's a great player, don't get me wrong, unbelievable. But Brett had something about him,
Yeah.
didn't he? Just if you look at the way that he played and all
Brett was
sorts of,
best of the four of them.
and I've seen a lot of all those guys play against the King, Wally Lewis, Cliffy Lyons and Barr and all those sort of blokes who were great players. But when they played against the King in Origin, they sort of like, I don't know, Wally had them like sort of hypnotised or something.
Yeah.
Brett was probably the only bloke I saw opposed
he's got the
to
win
the King,
record.
that would make it happen,
He's got the win rate. Whenever he played Origin, June Miles tells the story. Every time New South Wales pick a team, they go and look at the list and they go through, Brett Kenny's at centre, you beauty.
Yeah.
Or they go, oh, no, they've picked
He's
him
at
at 5'8".
5'8".
He said, New South Wales never jerried how much better they were.
Yeah.
But you talk about combinations, Matt. Sterling and Lamb never really worked.
No,
when they
that's
played
right.
in rep football together.
It's interesting.
And
yes.
Mortimer and Kenny never really worked.
No.
When they played together
Oil
in
and
rep
water.
football.
And remember, there was a time where Bozo were going to kangaroo tours and he'd go, mate, I can't split Ricky and Alf. I'll play them together. And
Yeah.
put Ricky in the 6. And it just never worked.
Never worked.
Because you've got a width player and a bloke who like to go.
But how long you got to play together before you actually? I know it'd be different with brothers, with you and Joey. But I'm saying, if you looked at Mortimer and Lamb, for instance,
Yep.
they would have played over 200 games together.
Yeah, but that's true, Block.
But you were training every day with them too. So
but they wouldn't have played 200 games if their styles didn't have the chemistry to gel.
Yeah.
And to Matty's point about a short player and a width player, you couldn't have that. So the thing about styles is when you've got a halves parent, they've got to complement each other.
Definitely.
They've just got, and let's remember, Kenny wasn't always 5'8" at Parramatta. Like, there was times Steve Ella went into 5'8",
He played in the
Kenny would
centres.
play in the centres.
Yeah, that's right.
So that did happen, but over time it emerged that the best combination was with Kenny at 6 because he was such a genius, and you just wanted him closer to the ball.
It's interesting that Turvey and Terry Lamb worked very well together because Turvey was a bloke, am I right in saying that would sort of more of a bloke to carry the ball to the line?
Yeah, he wanted the ball in his hands.
And Barr was the same. Barr was the sort of player, multi-dimensional. You could throw in the ball early, or you could cut the ball to the line. He'd be there to hit the hole.
I loved Barr's anticipation. I don't know mate. It's easy to say, oh mate, that bloke's supported for 100 tries and all that. But how did he do it?
Ran up the middle of the field.
Just down the middle. And
Ellery.
I reckon the amount of times that he got it off different players back inside, it doesn't matter because he was in exactly. It was a bit like you the other week. That intrigued me, when you said I'd take the field goals, but wherever the field I played on, I got myself in the same position.
Yeah.
And it would have been like Terry Lamb backing up.
Yeah.
I'll just get in that same position. Doesn't matter who I get the footy off. I'll be there.
Mick Hagan tells a story once when he first went to first grade. He said one of the players has dipped the ball around the corner and Barr's gone bang through the hole. And he said, as Barr's getting to the fullback, Hags is going, oh, this is going to be good. He's going to pass to me, draw the fullback, put me on the post. Barr went, fed him early.
Yeah.
So Mick Hags had to give it back to him.
No, he was good at that too, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was
that anticipation, like Ellery was like that, wasn't he?
Yeah.
As soon as something happened, he was halfway down the field.
Yeah, he could tell what was going on. Just back himself down the middle, unbelievable.
I'll tell you another one that's underrated as well, and this is an emerging combination, was Greg Alexander, Brad Izzard.
Yeah.
Brandy, who was lightning quick, skip across defenders. Brad Izzard was a hole hitter, really strong.
They didn't win together, though.
No.
That was Freddie.
That's what stopped there.
Freddie and Brandy.
Well, Steve Carter too.
Steve Carter.
Yeah. What Brandy in those days, Block?
Oh, just mate, explosive speed off the mark. Like I remember Alan Jones gave me a tape once of Greg Alexander's top 100 tries. I think Brandy suffered from in the 80s when everyone had a halfback and a 5'8". With Sterling and all those sort of guys and Mortimer and Alfie Langer come through and Ricky Stewart. Every team had a half or a 5'8". But Brandy, I mean, if you looked at pure rugby league ability, off the mark speed. He was a bit like Gazzy. I'm not saying he was as good as Gazzy. I'm just saying he was a bit like Brandy's head went back. He was a bit like when Gazzy made a break. They used to say, I used to talk to all the old blokes. They said as soon as his head went back, that was him in full flight.
Yeah,
Brandy was a bit like that. He could just and he had that anticipation. But for himself, there's a difference. The anticipation of the support player is a lot different of the bloke who anticipates with the ball and sees a weakness in the opposition and takes off himself. Brandy was a genius.
I think Matty, I think the real reason the halves had to come through as combinations and why they emerged in the 80s is because 80s is when defence started to get organised. So because the defence was organised, you then had to sort of start setting up your attack in order to be able to penetrate the defence. So that made halves even more, and their combinations even more important, because you couldn't just go out and play I'm going to play what's in front of me. Okay, I can't do anything. Offload to the bloke outside. You actually had to plan. Okay, how are we going to pick apart this defence? And so that's where I think that's why we see the emergence in the 80s of the halves playmakers, because you had. Obviously the standout, and it stands out in the 80s because you had Parramatta winning 4 premierships in the 80s and Canterbury winning 4 premierships in the 80s.
Different styles, but weren't they?
Yeah, completely different styles of how they played. But that was what really sort of put down the structure. And then what really then reinforced it was out of the 80s, we go into the 90s, and you got Ricky and Laurie, and you got Alfie and Kevy. So the two champion teams of the 90s, suddenly they're playing very similar. And every team was looking for a combination. I mean, halves almost came as a pairing throughout those eras.
Certainly did.